I'm trying with this guy, you know? Here you go, buddy.
Oh, did you put it back? Yeah.
So yeah, Doug, so we would do just like this, right?
Yeah,
so
you know,
would
Sam, you do a real good job doing that. I finally found something you can do well.
Yeah.
Welcome to Sam's Garage, presented by NH Oil Undercoating. On this episode of Sam's Garage, the Lokar team continues working on Kevin's Jeep by installing a new heavy-duty transfer case. Sam and Doug work on the second phase of detuning the Saleen Mustang to make it more streetable. Sam upgrades the exhaust and intake pipes on a Honda Civic Type R. And Teddy Morse stops by Sam's Garage with his original 92 Camaro to take it up a level with some modern upgrades. Travis and Kevin begin the process of assembling the transfer case so they can install it in Kevin's Jeep. Once everything has been assembled, the process of installing the new transfer case is fairly straightforward.
I like the color of that. So you think that's gonna work fine? What we gotta do is bring it in here?
I think so.
You guys been in here all week? What's going on?
We're waiting on you.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you come help me get this shifter assembled and we can get moving forward on this thing?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That way Travis can go ahead and install it. We'll go upstairs and install the rest of the transfer case from Atlas.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of going out of order on this, but, you know.
That's what we do. Is he gonna help us this time?
I don't know.
Oh, he's done most of the work, hasn't he?
Yeah, let's go. So we're gonna have to press these in. You can see they're kind of tight fit.
You want a
Wobbly.
hammer or do you want a vise?
I think if we put them in a vise, it'll keep them nice and flat. Travis
Okay.
said he would do it for us.
Sure, perfect.
I don't know if you remember doing the shifter in the big Jeep, but this is actually really impressive. This thing
Very
bolts right in. It looks exactly like the transfer case mount. that
And
we
it's
took out.
aluminum CNC, lightweight but very rugged.
Yeah.
Better than the plastic one we took out for sure.
Yeah, I think it's gonna work great.
Here you go, fellas, go.
There we go.
Good job.
In the instructions they sent, they give us a nice little diagram. It doesn't really go into it, but I think we can figure it out. Well, it's really nice. They're Siamese, so you can't
Yeah.
really put them in wrong. Basically what we're doing is prepping all the different pieces and components that we need to put this together to get it in the Jeep. This is actually a most common Jeep adapter for the JLs and such. This actually makes it work with the 392 cross member. So we'll mount that to there. We're gonna get the shifter put in. That way we don't have to come back down, back and forth. We'll get the cable bracket mounted to the transfer case, and we'll get everything ready so that when it goes under the Jeep, we can hook up the cables and then lift it into place. We'll have the studs ready. Everything will be good to go. One of the really unique things about the Atlas transfer case is that they give you 6 studs, but in each particular section, you have 6 options, or really 7 options. Advanced Adapters prides themselves on being able to index this thing, so you can drop the 4-wheel drive portion of it, the front drive shaft, up or down, depending on the clearance you have.
All right, so what you saw us do first is we installed the adapter that goes behind the transmission. But before you do that, don't forget that when you transfer over the motor mount, the little adapter plate that goes onto the bottom of the adapter onto the cross member, you are going to have to notch 2 spots. It says it in the instructions. Once the cross member and the transmission is in place, now you can line up the transfer case before you install your studs, because the studs are going to go into where you locate the transfer case. And you have to make sure you clear the bottom of the Jeep and you're not hanging out too low, and the front drive shaft is going to go through. Once that's lined up, you can put it in place. Take a marker, mark the point where you're going to put your first stud. There's going to be multiple holes. Ours was the 3rd one up. Every spot where there's multiple holes, you put the 3rd stud in. Make sure that you put it in with the Loctite into the adapter. Then you can put the transfer case onto those studs, bolting everything in place. Don't forget to make sure that the cables, left and right, are oriented correctly on the bottom where the transverse case goes so that you have the correct operations inside the cab. All right, we got our Atlas transfer case installed in Kevin's Jeep. That went really well, but we got a little bit of electrical left to do on it, huh?
Yeah, Atlas actually includes everything you need to hook up to all your factory stuff to tell you what, your 4 high, 4 low, and all that stuff. But since we're gonna put exhaust in this next week, I don't really want to run this until we know where all the hot stuff's going to be. It's just a safer way to go about it, you know what I mean?
That wasn't bad, was it? A little bit heavy, but not bad as an install. Atlas does a really good job. So if you guys have Jeeps out there, Gladiators, Wranglers, you want to update the transfer case or get away from all-wheel drive in your 392, check out Atlas transfer cases.
And the shifter.
And the shifter.
Welcome back to Sam's Garage, presented by NH Oil Undercoating. Sam helps Doug continue detuning the Saleen Mustang, which is currently running on E85 ethanol. They plan to switch back over to 93 octane gasoline, which is more consistent and better for daily driving on the street. Sam then retunes the computer to ensure the engine runs correctly on the new fuel.
This thing was putting out real close to 700 rear wheel horsepower. Car weighs 3,400 pounds, so the power to weight ratio on this is absolutely crazy. At 100 miles an hour, you can just put your foot on the gas and the car will go sideways. And on a racetrack, it's like driving a race car in the rain. It has so much power that you're trying to put it down. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna detune it so it makes it much more streetable. I can have a lot more fun onto it, and I don't have to worry about putting fuel in and going from station to station, because you can never control the quality of the E85 that you're gonna get. And on top of that, E85 will absorb moisture, so you have to really be running that fuel through it all the different time to make sure you have fresh fuel in it. So we're gonna really take a car. It's been a lot of fun making all this massive horsepower, but you get to a point where it's too much.
I'm gonna go ahead and hook up to the bottom of the fuel regulator. How Doug has this, he's got feed coming from the fuel tank to the bottom of the fuel regulator, and then he's got it coming out of the fuel regulator, going into the fuel rails, then return line from the back of the rails back to the tank. As long as you're going through the pressure regulator, it's gonna work. In this case, this is what we used to do back in the day to make a lot of fuel. Today, what you would do is run one big fat line, -10 into the side, plug the other side, or maybe run 2 to the rails, 1 return out the bottom of the regulator. Doug, since you, in this case, you've got it to where your fuel pumps come on with the key on.
Right.
We talked about that not being a good idea, but for this case, it's a really good idea because all you gotta do is turn the key on, and we got fuel coming out of the tank, and we're gonna empty it that way.
And why is it not a good idea, Sam?
Something happens on the racetrack, and you're upside down.
Yeah,
and
it's still pumping. Yeah,
it's still
not
pumping.
good.
If there's heat going on and fire, easy.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you want it to shut off.
Problem with alcohol fire, you can't see it.
You can't see it, no.
Can't see it.
That's crazy. Even ethanol is like that, huh?
Yeah.
That's crazy. So what I'm gonna do is hook up the laptop to it, and we're gonna remove first 40% fuel and about 3 degrees of timing. There's 2 things we have to change when it comes to going backwards from ethanol to 93 or going forward from 93 to ethanol. One is timing. Ethanol allows you to run more timing because the fuel is more stable. It's not gonna pre-ignite until a higher temperature, so therefore you can run more cylinder pressure. Timing is what makes your power. The second thing is the BTUs of ethanol are less than 93 octane gas, so therefore it's going to take more fuel introduced into the cylinder to get that same horsepower, sometimes 40 to 50%. So what I'm going to do is hook up the laptop to it, and we're going to remove first 40% fuel and about 3 degrees of timing. Cylinder pressure equals heat. Heat then ignites the fuel. So that's why you have pre-ignition, spark knock. You'll hear that sound, and that's because you got 2 flame fronts in the combustion chamber, and when they meet each other, they make a sound. But you also have spark knock in another way where your timing is too advanced, and therefore you will bang the bearings and you'll destroy the piston because you're hitting combustion before the stroke is at its top and on the other side of the crank.
Absolutely.
So you're beating it up, and things like this rod right here out of the Toyota Supra, my race car, the timing being too advanced, or you get pre-ignition due to bad fuel, you're gonna get something like this very expensive H-beam rod that's made to handle over 1,000 horsepower bend right here.
Sometimes you lose sight when you're building a car. You've got to make it streetable and you've got to have a lot of fun inside the car. But if you're always having to have a car that's running right on the edge all the time, you just can't really relax and just enjoy it.
That's so true.
Take some of the edginess off. It's just a lot more fun to drive.
Yeah, it's not always about bragging rights. One of the biggest problems I've seen being a mechanic in the last 28 years is rodents. They get everywhere in your vehicle, RV, boat. They find a little nook and cranny. They make a huge mess, and they cost you a lot of issues in the future.
Yeah, agricultural as well.
Absolutely.
It is a real problem when you get into like a combine or something, or anything that's sitting around for a long time, an RV, a boat. We've even went as far as had this independently tested with a laboratory. They set up the tests various different ways, and we know that the effectiveness is based on three things. It is touch, it is fear, and it is scent. We put a predatory synthetic scent in there, so they believe that there is a predator in the area. So we're playing it off of all three of their fears, and it's become very effective. I mean, we were the most effective in the category with the testing.
That's absolutely awesome, because let me tell you, there's nothing more of a problem than a rodent, especially.
Welcome back to more Sam's Garage, presented by NHOU. This is a special moment for me on Sam's Garage, where my personal Civic Type R received some upgrades courtesy of Sam. He'll be installing a new downpipe with high flow cat, turbo inlet pipe, and high volume intake to make the turbo more efficient.
So this week I'm going back to my roots. I can't tell you how many times we built Hondas and Acuras back in the day at Madavi Motorsports. That's what got us started. So this one belongs to a good friend of mine, Chuck Farnham. It's a 2017 Civic Type R, turbocharged 2-liter from the factory. This thing puts out 356 horsepower at the wheels because of the Honda that we installed on it. It's also got a catback 3-inch JDM exhaust. What I'm going to do this week is upgrade it some more with a high flow downpipe, along with a mid pipe going to that 3-inch exhaust, so everything will be 3 inches. And then we're gonna go ahead and upgrade the intercooler piping and the intercooler pipe that goes from the turbo to the throttle body. I'm gonna manage that heat by installing DEI anywhere I can as far as the heat wrap goes and the reflective tape goes. Let's get started. All right, so this right here is the inlet pipe for the turbo. This is 2.5-inch full cast aluminum. This is the aftermarket piece. It weighs a fraction of what the OEM one weighed. It's 3 inches, stainless steel. Went ahead and put some DEI wrap on it. Now on this Civic Type R, the intake pipe that is on the throttle body, to replace it, you got to remove the battery. It's a perfect time for you guys to go ahead and replace the shifter bushings. When you have everything out, you're staring at them. It takes about 10 minutes to go ahead and replace it. Do so, it's going to be a huge upgrade for you. Now what we're going to do is remove the heat shields for the turbo. When it comes to the O2 sensor, you're going to need a socket like this, because there's a heat shield around the O2 sensor, and so this is the only tool that's going to fit to remove that O2 sensor. Do not discard that heat shield. We're going to reuse it on the new downpipe. So what we did was install intercooler piping for the turbo's inlet pipe along with a cold air box, okay? That's gonna get us a lot more cold, efficient air going into the turbo. And then what we did was remove the downpipe. The downpipe had a huge restrictive catalytic converter on it. We took that catalytic converter and cut it in half with a high flow cat, and then the pipe itself is 3 inches in diameter. Sure, it's a 2.5-inch outlet for some reason, but he's still gonna make a whole bunch of horsepower because it's a lot less restrictive than the factory deal. And then what we did was we wrapped the exhaust piping with DEI titanium wrap. That's gonna insulate the piping, keeping the heat from getting and escaping into the engine bay. It's also gonna allow for the hot gases to stay within the exhaust, creating for better efficiency, better scavenging, better spool for the turbo. So that's what the heat wrap does for us in this case. It's got a 3-inch exhaust on it, so now we have 2.5-inch mandrel bent going all the way to the 3-inch. That turbo is going to spool up a lot faster than before. And then what we did was we put a little heat shield around the intake pipe going to the turbo, because the intake pipe sits right above the turbo manifold. So you want to see if you can keep as much of that heat dissipating from the turbo onto the inlet pipe, because that means that the intercooler is going to have to work harder cooling that air charge. The heat wrap on top is going to be really nice. We got a nice big 6-inch intake versus the standard K&N drop-in. This car made 356 horsepower at the wheels before. We should have added at least 20 horsepower to it. Chuck, better like this. That was a lot of work. Sure, it does not look like a lot of work, but it was. Let me tell you guys something. When it comes to a turbo application, if you want to make horsepower, make the exhaust bigger. That'll make the turbo spool up faster. But when you make the intercooler piping bigger, all you're doing is creating lag. Unless you've upgraded the turbo and the manifold so you can have more boost pressure at a higher RPM, you're not doing yourself a justice by making the turbo intercooler piping bigger. But the exhaust being bigger, absolute must when it comes to a turbo application. So if you guys want to make a bunch of horsepower, don't forget you're going to create a whole bunch of heat. Go to design engineering and manage that heat. Get your horsepower back, get your timing back, and reduce the underhood temperatures by a couple of degrees.
Teddy Morse from Ed Morse Auto Group stops by Sam's garage with his 92 Chevy Camaro. Sam plans to upgrade the wheels and suspension as well as install a new 383 crate engine from Ed Morse.
Welcome aboard, Teddy.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you here.
It's great to be here.
It's such an awesome car.
It absolutely is, but I'm counting on you and the team to make it better. This is my favorite car that I had in high school. I don't want to say how long ago that was, but it was a while. Everything about this third gen, the T-tops, the classic lines. When they changed this Camaro to the fourth gen in 1993, for me, it lost something. Yeah. You know, this body style, this model, this is what brings me back to the good old days, for lack of a better term.
Man. The 80s was a great time for cars. All the companies were finding their way in the 80s, transitioning from the 70s old school technology into the 90s new school technology. We all wanted this car. You got such a beautiful copy of one. 60,000 miles on this thing.
We're going to make it a lot better because as beautiful as that generation of cars was, where it lacked, at least for me, was in performance.
With this one, we're going to keep it exactly how it looks. We're going to go to an 18-inch IROC wheel. We're going to upgrade the brakes and the suspension from Ed Morse Automotive Group. Complete turnkey package, GM 383 crate motor with over 450 horsepower. It's going to bolt right in. It's going to look OEM. It's going to be fuel injected. So
That's going to be
this thing's going to look exactly how it does with a little bit of IROC oomph to it, but it's going to be way faster than. It's going to have the same horsepower as today's Camaro.
You're speaking to my heart right now. I gotta tell you, this car means so much to me. That's the neat thing about automobiles and cars is they can really take you back. When you open up that door and you slide behind the wheel, I go right back to 17-year-old.
So Ed Morse Automotive Group, you're third generation, 75 years since 1946.
1946. We actually just hit 77 years this year. Company was started by my grandfather in 1946. He worked as a doorman at a hotel down in Miami Beach, and one of the functions of a doorman at the time was he tried to provide rent-a-cars for the guests. Well, it wasn't long before he's making more money renting cars than he was as a doorman, so he quit his doorman job, took out a loan from his father, and opened up Morse Motors Rent-A-Car in the Little River area of Miami Beach. And that's how he got started in the car business, 1946. I took over our company in 2016. It was July, right after my father passed away. My grandfather died in 2012. He was 91 years old, lived just an amazing life. My dad died 4 short years later. So when I got the chance to actually start expanding, his voice was always echoing in my head, you know, am I doing the right thing? We went from 14 stores in Florida, now we have 44 in 7 states, and things are going really, really good.
So tell me about your passion for Harley Davidsons.
Passion is the right word for it. I've been riding Harley since I was 20 years old. My father actually got me into it, and we used to ride together.
But Grandpa, not so much.
Grandpa wanted nothing to do with it. My dad wanted to become a Harley dealer. My grandfather, at the time, running our company, put the kibosh on that. So when I got the chance to do it, as it turned out, that was Daytona Harley Davidson.
That's the creme de la creme, huh?
That is the mothership. It's without question the most iconic Harley store in the world. A number of causes that are important, were important to my grandfather, my father, and me. Muscular Dystrophy Association, we do a big golf tournament every year for them. We support Boys and Girls Club. And then something that's especially important to me is supporting our men and women of the U.S. military, both active duty and veterans. Those who have the ability to help also have the responsibility to help. You hear people say, you know, a lot of times you don't have anything to prove to anybody but yourself. I'm not sure if I agree with that because I wanted to prove a lot to my mother, to my sister, to my team, to my grandfather and father up in heaven. I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to prove something to other people if it comes from a good place. This is my dream machine right here, and I know there's nobody better to take care of her than you, so.
It's an honor.
Man, I cannot wait.
Be sure to check out Sam's Garage on these other media platforms. Send us questions and feedback to info@samsgaragetv.com. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Sam's Garage. Kevin's Jeep received a new transfer case built for off-roading. Doug's Saleen Mustang is making more manageable horsepower for the street. My Honda Civic Type R is now breathing better while keeping the temperatures down. And Teddy Morse is ready to start the upgrades on his '92 Chevy Camaro.